Hi, welcome to the Aftermath Tales. Ready for a new story? Very well, let's begin.
What would you do when you find out that your own husband of 8 years asked you to go check on his mother so he could make his girlfriend move in and change the locks? I never thought I'd be asking myself that question. But here I am, Alyssa Cranford-Larson, 32 years old, sitting in my car outside my mother-in-law's house with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, trying to process what I just discovered. Let me back up a little. I'm the owner of a small online business, children's clothing, handmade with love. It started as something simple, really. I've always loved to sew, and when my daughter Heidi was born 7 years ago, I found myself making all her little dresses and outfits. There's something magical about creating something beautiful with your own hands, something that makes your child's eyes light up when they put it on. Heidi became my unofficial model from the very beginning. She'd parade around the house in her new dresses, spinning so the skirts would flare out, demanding fashion shows for anyone who'd watch. "Mom, you have to make me the prettiest dress for school picture day," she'd say, and I'd spend hours choosing the perfect fabric, the right buttons, making sure every stitch was perfect. The other moms at school started noticing. "Where did you get Heidi's dress? It's gorgeous," they'd ask at pickup time. When I told them I made it myself, their eyes would widen. "Would you make one for Emma? For Sophie? For Madison?" The requests kept coming, and what started as a labor of love for my own daughter slowly grew into something more. Art, my husband of 8 years, he encouraged me. "You're so talented, Liz," he'd say, watching me work late into the evening at my sewing machine. "You should really turn this into a business." Art works in an office downtown, steady hours, steady pay. Nothing glamorous, but reliable, or so I thought. The business took off faster than I expected. Word of mouth is powerful in our neighborhood, and summer became my busiest season with all the birthday parties and special occasions. I was booked solid through August, working on custom orders, managing my small website, coordinating with suppliers. It was exhausting but fulfilling in a way that surprised me. But then, 3 days ago, Art's mother, Therese, called. I could hear her voice through the phone as Art talked to her in the kitchen, that strained tone she gets when her arthritis is bothering her. She's 68 and lives about 2 hours away in the house where Art grew up, usually independent to a fault, but when the pain flares up, she needs help with basic things around the house. "Mom's having a rough time," Art told me after hanging up. "Her arthritis is really bad right now. She can barely get around, and you know how she is about asking for help." I did know. Therese was proud, the kind of woman who'd rather struggle in silence than admit she needed assistance. For her to call meant things were really difficult. "Maybe we should drive up this weekend. Bring Heidi," I suggested. "Make it a family visit." Art shook his head. "I can't get away from work right now. Johnson's breathing down everyone's necks about that quarterly report. But you could go, couldn't you? It's summer vacation, and you said you finished Mrs. Peterson's order yesterday." He was right. For once I was caught up on orders. No urgent deadlines looming. It was actually perfect timing. "I could go help her for a few days," I agreed. "Get her house organized, maybe stock her freezer with some meals." "That would be perfect," Art said, and something about his tone made me look at him more carefully. But he was already turning away, checking his phone. "You're so good with her, Liz. She listens to you." That was true. Therese and I had always gotten along well. She appreciated that I didn't try to change Art, that I supported his dreams even when they seemed impractical. She loved watching Heidi grow up, loved the little dresses I made for her granddaughter. So yesterday morning, I packed a bag for a few days, dropped Heidi off at my sister Helene's house for what was supposed to be a fun cousin sleepover, and drove the 2 hours to Therese's house. The drive was peaceful, windows down, music playing softly. I was actually looking forward to the change of pace, to having some quiet time to think about where to take the business next. I should have known something was wrong when Therese answered the door, looking perfectly fine. "Alyssa, what a lovely surprise," she said, but there was confusion in her eyes. "What brings you by, dear?" "Art said you called about your arthritis flaring up, that you needed help around the house." The confusion deepened. "My arthritis? Oh, it's been quite manageable lately, actually. I haven't had a bad spell in weeks. We stood there looking at each other, and I felt the first cold thread of suspicion curl in my stomach. Art said you called him 3 days ago. I did call him, she said slowly. But it was just to chat to see how Heidi was doing with summer vacation. I certainly didn't ask for help. That's when everything started to unravel. Sitting in Therese's kitchen, drinking tea from her good china, I called Art's office. His colleague Mike answered his extension. Oh, Art, he took some personal days, said he had some family stuff to handle at home. Family stuff. At home. While I was 2 hours away, taking care of a problem that didn't exist. My hands were shaking as I hung up the phone. Therese was watching me with concern, but I couldn't explain what I was thinking. Not yet. Not until I knew for sure. I think I need to head back home, I told her. There might be some confusion about why I'm here. She didn't ask questions, just hugged me tight and told me to drive safely. And now here I am, parked 3 houses down from my own home, watching a moving truck in my driveway, watching strangers carry boxes and furniture into the house where I've lived for 5 years, where my daughter took her first steps, where I built my business, where my husband is standing on the front porch directing traffic, with his arm around a woman I've never seen before, a woman who's clearly moving in. I sat in my car for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, watching my life being dismantled piece by piece. The moving truck was nearly empty now, and I could see Art checking items off a clipboard like this was just another Tuesday, like he wasn't destroying everything we'd built together. Finally, I couldn't sit there anymore. My hands were still shaking as I got out of the car and walked up my own driveway, a driveway I wouldn't be walking up much longer, apparently. Art saw me coming, and his face went pale. The woman beside him, blonde, young, wearing one of those effortless sundresses that probably cost more than I spent on fabric in a month, looked between us with undisguised curiosity. Alyssa, Art said, and his voice was strained. You're back early? Am I? My voice sounded surprisingly steady. Funny thing, Art, your mother's arthritis is doing just fine. In fact, she had no idea why I was there. The woman stepped a little closer to Art, like she was staking her claim. She was beautiful in that polished way that comes from having time for the gym and regular salon appointments. 26, maybe 27. Young enough that 8 years ago, when Art and I were getting married, she would have been in college. Look, Liz, Art started, but I cut him off. Where are my things? My sewing machine? My fabric? My inventory? I have orders to fill, Art. Mrs. Chen is expecting her daughter's birthday dress next week. Art shifted uncomfortably. Everything's in a storage unit downtown. Unit 247. Here's the key. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key, holding it out like it was supposed to make everything okay. I stared at the key, then at him. A storage unit. The house is in my name, Alyssa. It was my credit that qualified us for the mortgage. But you can keep Heidi. Rose doesn't want kids anyway. The casual way he said it, like he was discussing who got to keep the coffee maker in a breakup, made something snap inside me. How generous of you, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You'll let me keep our daughter. Rose finally spoke up, her voice sweet and confident. Look, Alyssa, I know this is hard, but sometimes these things just happen. Art fell out of love with you and found his true love. She smiled, actually smiled, as she slipped her arm through Art's. He needs someone like me, someone he's head over heels in love with. You're just history. I looked at this woman, this girl, who was so casually destroying my family, and then at my husband of 8 years who was letting her do it. Rose. Now I remember her. I heard her name from Art himself, telling me that he's lucky to have a good assistant. That Rose. His assistant, I said, the pieces clicking together. You're his assistant. How long, Art? How long have you been planning this? It just happened, Liz. How long? I demanded. Rose answered for him, clearly enjoying herself. 6 months. He's been staying at my apartment most nights for the past 3 months. We've been looking for the right time to what? To throw me out of my own home? To put my business in storage like it's garage sale leftovers? Art finally found his voice. You'll be fine, Liz. You're strong. You've got your business. In a storage unit. And you've got Heidi. That's what you always wanted anyway, right? To be a mom? The dismissiveness in his tone, the way he reduced everything I'd built to just being a mom, made me see red. "You have no idea what you're throwing away," I said, looking between them. "But you will. Both of you will pay for what you've done to me and Heidi. When she asks why Daddy doesn't live with us anymore, when she cries because her family is broken, I'll make sure she knows exactly who's responsible." Art's face flushed. "Don't you dare turn her against me." "I won't have to, Art. Your actions will speak for themselves." I turned to Rose, who was still smirking like this was all some amusing drama she got to watch unfold. "And you," I said, my voice low and steady, "you think you won something here? You think a man who can throw away 8 years of marriage and his own daughter this easily won't do the same to you when someone younger and shinier comes along? You're 26 now? What happens when you're 36 and some 26-year-old starts working late with him?" Her smirk faltered just a little. I snatched the storage unit key from Art's hand and walked back to my car without another word. I didn't trust myself to say anything else without completely losing it, and I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. But the moment I pulled into Helene's driveway, I fell apart. My sister opened the door before I even knocked, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. "Lise? What happened? Where's—" She stopped when she saw my expression. "Oh, no. Oh, honey, no." And that's when I completely lost it. 8 years of marriage, a home, a family, all of it gone because my husband decided he'd rather play house with his 26-year-old assistant. Helene held me while I sobbed on her couch, and when I finally managed to get the whole story out between hiccuping breaths, I thought she might actually drive over there and commit murder. "That bastard," she kept saying, "that absolute bastard. And that little—" She caught herself glancing toward the stairs where Heidi was presumably playing with her cousins, blissfully unaware that her world had just imploded. "What am I going to tell her, Helene? How do I explain this to a 7-year-old? My sister's face was hard with fury. "You tell her the truth. That sometimes adults make very bad choices, but that doesn't change how much you love her. And that her father is going to regret this for the rest of his miserable life." I wished I had her confidence. Right now, sitting in the wreckage of everything I thought I knew about my life, I wasn't sure about anything except that somehow, some way, I was going to rebuild. I had to. For Heidi. For myself. But first, I had to figure out how to pick up the pieces of my business from a storage unit and start over. The next morning, I woke up on Helene's couch with a crick in my neck and the hollow feeling that comes after crying yourself to sleep. For just a moment, in that space between sleeping and fully waking, I forgot. Then reality crashed back down. Helene was already up, making coffee in her kitchen. She'd always been an early riser, even when we were kids. "How'd you sleep?" she asked, though we both knew the answer. "Terribly." I sat up, running my hands through my hair. "Where's Heidi?" "Still sleeping with Emma and Jake. They stayed up late watching movies." She handed me a mug of coffee, made exactly how I liked it. "We need to talk about what you're going to tell her." My stomach clenched. In all the shock and fury of yesterday, I'd been putting off the hardest part, explaining to my 7-year-old daughter that her family was broken. "I don't know how to do this, Helene." "You'll figure it out. You always do." She sat down across from me. "But first, don't you think you should check on your business stuff? See what condition everything's in?" She was right. I had customers counting on me, orders that needed to be filled. Mrs. Chen's daughter's birthday dress was supposed to be finished by Friday. The Morrison twins needed their matching flower girl dresses for their aunt's wedding next weekend. I couldn't let my personal disaster destroy their special moments. "Will you watch Heidi for a few hours?" "Of course. Take as long as you need." The storage facility was one of those sprawling complexes on the edge of town, all beige metal buildings and numbered roll-up doors. Unit 247 was in the back corner, and my hands shook slightly as I turned the key. I held my breath as the door rolled up, not knowing what I'd find. To my surprise, everything was there and carefully organized. My sewing machine sat on a small table, protected by its cover. Plastic bins held my fabric, sorted by color and type, just the way I'd had them in my craft room. My dress forms stood like silent sentinels, and boxes labeled in Art's handwriting contained my finished inventory and works in progress. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something that might have been gratitude. At least he hadn't destroyed my work out of spite. But then I spotted something that made my chest tight. A note taped to my sewing machine in Art's familiar scrawl. "I know this matters to you. I'm not a monster, Liz." From Art, I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash bin by the door. Not a monster. He'd thrown away 8 years of marriage and was stealing my daughter's home, but he carefully packed my sewing supplies so he wasn't a monster. I spent the next 2 hours loading my car with the most essential items: my sewing machine, current orders, basic supplies. The rest would have to wait until I figured out where I was going to live and work. By the time I got back to Helene's, I could hear the kids playing in the backyard. Through the kitchen window, I watched Heidi on the swing set, her hair flying as she pumped her legs higher and higher. She looked so carefree, so happy. In a few minutes, I was going to change that forever. "Heidi, sweetheart, can you come inside for a minute? Mommy needs to talk to you." She bounded through the back door, all energy and smiles. "Mommy, Aunt Helene made pancakes and they were shaped like butterflies. Are we going home today? I want to show you the new friendship bracelet Emma taught me to make." My heart broke a little more. "Let's sit down, baby." We settled on the couch, and I pulled her close to me, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the lingering sweetness of syrup. "Heidi, you know how sometimes grown-ups make big changes in their lives?" She nodded, suddenly serious. "Kids have an instinct for when something important is coming. Well, Daddy and I have decided that we're not going to live in the same house anymore." Her little face scrunched up in confusion. Like when Tommy's parents got divorced? The word hit me like a punch to the gut, even though I'd been expecting it. "Yes, sweetheart, like that." "But why?" Her voice was small, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that her father fell in love with someone else? That he chose a new life that didn't include us? Sometimes adults fall out of love, honey. It doesn't mean we don't love you. We both love you so, so much. But Daddy and I can't live together anymore. Did I do something wrong? The question came out as a whisper, and it nearly destroyed me. "No, baby. Oh, no." I held her tighter. "This has nothing to do with you. You are perfect and wonderful and loved. This is about grown-up problems, not anything you did." She was quiet for a long moment, and I could practically see her little mind working. "Where will we live?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out together. Maybe we'll find a new house, just for us. And you can help me pick out your new room." "Will I still see Daddy?" Another knife to the heart. "Yes, you'll still see Daddy. We'll work that out." She cried then, and I cried with her, holding my little girl while her world shifted beneath her feet. But even as we cried together, something was crystallizing in my mind. I had always been the one to handle everything: the household finances, Heidi's school activities, doctor's appointments, business planning. Art had been content to coast along, letting me manage the details of our life. I'd thought it was because he trusted me, but maybe it was because he'd already checked out emotionally long before Rose came along, which meant I'd been essentially on my own for a while without realizing it. And if I could run a household and build a business while married to someone who'd mentally already left, I could certainly do it on my own with full control over my decisions. After Heidi finally fell asleep for her nap, emotionally exhausted, I found myself thinking about practical matters. I needed to find a place to live that had space for my sewing setup. I needed to contact my customers and let them know there might be delays. The next few weeks were a blur of practical decisions and swallowed pride. I couldn't afford a lawyer to fight Art, not when I had barely enough savings to cover Heidi's immediate needs. So when he presented me with divorce papers, I signed them. Just like that, 8 years of marriage reduced to signatures on legal documents. We met at a coffee shop downtown to discuss the details. Art brought Rose with him, which felt like another slap in the face, but I kept my expression neutral. "I'll pay child support," Art said, sliding an envelope across the table. "Here's the first 6 months up front, and I'll send monthly payments after that. Plus, there's some extra money in there to help you transition. Like I was changing jobs, not having my entire life upended. I looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. "And visitation?" Art glanced at Rose, who was examining her manicured nails with obvious boredom. Let's keep it flexible for now. I'll call when I can take her. Rose looked up then, her smile sharp as a blade. Maybe you can use that cheap fabric of yours to make yourself some new clothes, Alyssa. You know, for job interviews and such. The comment hit exactly where she intended it to. My hand-sewn clothes, made from affordable fabrics I'd carefully chosen for their quality despite their price, suddenly felt shabby under her designer-clad scrutiny. But I didn't respond. I just picked up the envelope, stood up, and walked away. That envelope contained $3,000. It should have felt like a fortune to someone in my position, but it felt like 30 pieces of silver. After I signed the papers, I legally changed my name back to Alyssa Cranford. It felt like reclaiming myself, taking back the identity I'd had before Art Larson entered my life. 8 years later, my phone buzzes with another notification from my assistant. Miss Cranford, Nordstrom wants to discuss expanding the spring line to include shoes. Should I schedule the call for this afternoon? I smile as I approve the meeting from my corner office on the 32nd floor of downtown Seattle. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I can see the city sprawling below me, and somewhere out there, in boutiques and department stores across the country, children are wearing clothes that bear my label. Heidi & Co. 8 years. 8 years since I signed those divorce papers with shaking hands and Rose's cruel words ringing in my ears. 8 years since I thought my world was ending. I had no idea it was just beginning. The transition wasn't easy. Nothing about those first few years was easy. My Aunt Wanda, bless her heart, was moving to Florida to be closer to her grandchildren. And she offered me her house at a rent so low it was practically charity. "Family helps family," she said, pressing the keys into my hands. "Pay me when you can, sweetheart, and don't you dare argue with me about it." The house was perfect for us. 2 bedrooms, a large basement I could convert into a proper sewing space, and only 15 minutes from Heidi's school. For the first 6 months, Aunt Wanda refused to take any rent at all, despite my protests. Those were the hardest months of my life. Art never called. Not once. No weekend visits, no phone calls to check on Heidi, no birthday cards. The monthly child support payments arrived like clockwork. I'll give him that. But that was the only evidence that Heidi's father even remembered she existed. She stopped asking about him after the first year. Children are remarkably resilient, but they also learn quickly when someone has abandoned them. I threw myself into work with a desperation that bordered on mania. While Heidi slept, I sewed. When she was at school, I sewed. When she went to bed, I sewed until my eyes burned and my fingers cramped. Rose's comment about my cheap fabrics echoed in my head every time I sat down at my machine. Cheap fabrics. We'll see about that. I started researching suppliers, learning about quality textiles, studying fashion trends and construction techniques. If I was going to rebuild my business, I was going to do it right, no more accepting good enough. Every dress had to be perfect. The sleepless nights were brutal. I'd work until 2 or 3 in the morning, then wake up at 6 to get Heidi ready for school. Coffee became my best friend and worst enemy. Some mornings, I'd catch my reflection in the mirror and barely recognize the exhausted woman staring back at me. But slowly, gradually, things began to change. Mrs. Chen loved her daughter's birthday dress so much that she referred 3 of her friends. Those 3 friends referred more customers. Word of mouth grew into a steady stream of orders, which grew into a waiting list, which grew into something I'd never expected. Demand that exceeded my ability to keep up. That's when I made my first big decision. Instead of limiting my orders to match my capacity, I hired help. Sarah, a recent fashion school graduate, answered my Craigslist ad for a seamstress assistant. She was talented, eager, and willing to work for less than she was worth because she needed the experience. Within 6 months, Sarah and I were working out of my basement 12 hours a day, fulfilling orders faster than I'd ever imagined possible. Within a year, we'd outgrown the basement and moved into a small commercial space across town. Heidi was my inspiration for everything. When she was 8, she announced that she wanted to help design a dress for girls who were sad like I was when Daddy left. That dress, a cheerful yellow sundress with hidden pockets shaped like hearts, became our first viral social media post. A local mom blogger shared a photo of her daughter wearing it, and suddenly I had orders from across the state. That's when I learned about scaling, about manufacturing, about the difference between being a seamstress and being a business owner. I took online courses in business management, marketing, and supply chain logistics. I learned about trademark protection, licensing agreements, and international shipping regulations. Every rejection was fuel. Every obstacle was just another problem to solve. When department store buyers initially dismissed my line as too niche or not commercial enough, I pivoted to online sales and built a customer base that proved them wrong. When manufacturers told me my quality standards were too high to be profitable, I found manufacturers who understood that quality was exactly what would set us apart. By year 3, Heidi & Co. was in regional boutiques across the Pacific Northwest. By year 5, we had our first major department store contract. By year 7, we'd gone international, with distribution in Canada, the UK, and Australia. The business I built from my basement now employs 47 people full-time and has revenue that I never could have imagined when I was sitting in that coffee shop, signing away my marriage for $3,000. But success wasn't just about proving Rose wrong, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't satisfying. It was about proving to myself that I was more than just Art's discarded wife, more than just a woman who could be replaced and forgotten. Most importantly, it was about showing Heidi that when life knocks you down, you don't just get back up, you get back up stronger. She's 15 now, and she models for our teen line when she's not too busy with school and soccer. She's confident, smart, and kind, everything I hoped she'd become, despite growing up without her father's presence in her life. "Mom," she said to me just last week, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if Dad hadn't left?" I thought about it seriously, the way her question deserved. You know what, sweetheart? I think we're exactly where we're supposed to be. And for the first time since that terrible day 8 years ago, I meant it completely. Today I'm meeting with the regional director of Pinnacle Retail Group about a proposal they've been pursuing for months. They want exclusive rights to a new line I've been developing, affordable, high-quality children's clothing for everyday families. Not the luxury Heidi & Co. pieces that sell in boutiques, but something accessible to working parents who still want beautiful, well-made clothes for their children. It's a smart business move for them. While Heidi & Co. commands premium prices in specialty stores, this new line, which I'm calling Heidi Everyday, could capture the massive middle market that Pinnacle dominates. They've been chasing me for 6 months, ever since our market research showed the potential for $200 million in annual revenue. I've chosen my outfit carefully, a tailored navy suit I designed myself, paired with understated jewelry that whispers rather than shouts wealth. My hair is professionally styled, my makeup flawless but subtle. I look like what I am, a successful businesswoman who belongs in boardrooms and corner offices. The restaurant is one of those exclusive places downtown where deals are made over 12-course tasting menus. I arrive right on time and give my name to the hostess. "Ms. Cranford? Right this way." Mr. Davidson had to step out to take an urgent call, but he'll be right back. Your table is ready. I follow her through the dimly lit dining room, mentally reviewing the terms I'm willing to accept. This partnership could mean everything. Mass market distribution, enormous marketing support, the kind of growth that would secure not just Heidi's future, but the futures of all 47 employees who depend on our success. The hostess stops at a corner table, and I look up to see 2 familiar faces staring back at me in shock. Art and Rose. They're both dressed well. Art in what looks like an expensive suit, Rose in designer clothing that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. They're older, of course. Art's hairline has receded, and there are lines around his eyes that weren't there 8 years ago. Rose is 34 or 35 now, and while she still looks polished, there's something harder about her now, a brittleness that wasn't there when she was 26. The years haven't been as kind to her as expensive skincare would suggest. For a moment, none of us speak. I can see them taking in my appearance, trying to reconcile the woman standing before them with the devastated wife they last saw in that coffee shop. "Alyssa?" Art finally manages. "What are you doing here?" I take my seat across from them with practiced composure, though my heart is racing. "I'm here for a business meeting. What are you doing here?" Rose recovers first, her old smugness reasserting itself, though I notice she's wearing a wedding ring now. Clearly, she became Mrs. Rose Larson at some point. We're here with Pinnacle Retail Group. Art's been promoted to operations manager. She looks me up and down critically. You look different. Is your boss meeting us here too? There's that familiar condescension in her voice, the same tone she used 8 years ago when she commented about my cheap fabrics. Are you working as someone's assistant now? Art asks, and I can hear the satisfaction in his voice. I mean, that's fine, Alyssa. Not everyone can make it in business. At least you're employed. Rose laughs, a tinkling sound that grates against my nerves, though it sounds more forced than it used to. Oh, Art, don't be mean. I'm sure Alyssa is doing her best. What happened to that little sewing business anyway? Did it not work out? They're both looking at me with that mixture of pity and superiority that I remember so well. They think I'm here as someone's employee, someone's assistant, taking notes and fetching coffee while the real business people make deals. I smile and it's genuine. Just like you, Rose. After all these years, you're still an assistant. Her face flushes slightly. I'm the executive assistant to the regional director. It's a very important position. I'm sure it is. My voice is perfectly pleasant, perfectly professional. Before either of them can respond, I hear footsteps approaching our table. Miss Cranford, so sorry to keep you waiting. Robert Davidson, the regional director I've been corresponding with for weeks, approaches with his hand extended and a warm smile. He's a distinguished man in his 50s, the kind of executive who exudes authority and success. The call ran longer than expected, but I'm excited to discuss this partnership. Heidi & Co. has been making quite an impression in the market. I stand to shake his hand, and I can see Art and Rose's expressions shifting from confusion to dawning realization. Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Davidson. I think you'll find our expansion proposal very compelling. He turns to Art and Rose with a polite smile. Art, Rose, I'd like you to meet Alyssa Cranford, the founder and CEO of Heidi & Co. We've been pursuing an exclusive partnership with her new affordable line for months now. The silence that follows is deafening. I watch as Art's face goes through several stages of shock, understanding, and then something that might be horror. I can see him struggling to process that I've reverted to my maiden name. He probably doesn't even remember that Cranford was my name before I married him. Heidi & Co., he repeats slowly, and I can see the moment it clicks. His abandoned daughter's name, now emblazoned on clothing in boutiques and department stores across 3 countries. Rose's mouth opens and closes like a fish, all her smug superiority evaporating. The expensive wedding ring on her finger, which she's been unconsciously twisting throughout this conversation, catches the light. Yes, I say, settling back into my chair with perfect composure. Named after my daughter. She's 15 now, by the way, Art, in case you were wondering. Mr. Davidson, oblivious to the undercurrents, takes his seat. Well, I hope we can finally convince you to give us exclusive rights to Heidi every day. Our projections show this could revolutionize how families shop for children's clothing. The silence that followed Mr. Davidson's introduction stretched like a taut wire about to snap. I watched Art's face cycle through expressions: confusion, recognition, shock, and finally, something that looked like horror. Heidi & Co., he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Rose had gone completely still beside him, her perfectly manicured fingers frozen around her water glass. I could see her mind working, trying to process what she was hearing. Yes, I said, my voice steady as granite, named after my daughter. Mr. Davidson, blissfully unaware of the bomb he'd just detonated, settled into his chair with enthusiasm. Alyssa has built something truly remarkable. Heidi & Co. has captured a market segment that, frankly, we've been struggling to reach effectively. He turned to Art with the casual authority of a man used to being obeyed. Art, why don't you walk us through the demographic analysis for the middle market expansion? Show Miss Cranford why Pinnacle is the perfect partner for reaching working families. I watched my ex-husband's face drain of color. The man who had once dismissed my little sewing business was now expected to present marketing strategies for reaching my customers. Art fumbled with his portfolio, papers sliding across the table as his hands shook slightly. He cleared his throat, tried again. The demographic analysis shows. His eyes met mine across the table, and I saw him fully grasp the magnitude of what was happening. The woman he'd thrown away like yesterday's trash was sitting across from him as the CEO of a company his own employer desperately wanted to partner with. The target demographic, he started again, then stopped. A bead of sweat appeared at his hairline despite the restaurant's perfect climate control. Rose's jaw was clenched so tightly I wondered if she might crack a tooth. Her knuckles had gone white around her glass, and I could see the effort it was taking her to maintain her composure. I could have let him flounder. Part of me, the part that still remembered signing divorce papers with shaking hands while Rose smirked beside him, wanted to watch him crash and burn in front of his boss. But I didn't need to humiliate him to win. I'd already won. "Perhaps I can help clarify the market opportunity," I said, my voice cutting through Art's stammering like a knife through butter. The Heidi Everyday line targets working families, household incomes between $50,000 and $100,000 who want quality children's clothing without luxury pricing. Think target quality with boutique design sensibility. Mr. Davidson's eyes lit up. Exactly what we've been missing. Art, you should be taking notes. Art fumbled for a pen, his hands still unsteady. I continued, laying out market research and demographic analysis with the confident precision of someone who'd built an empire from nothing. Our research shows 78% of parents in this income bracket are frustrated with fast fashion quality but can't afford boutique prices. Heidi Everyday fills that gap. Durable, stylish clothing at $25 to $45 per piece instead of our premium line's $80 to $150 range. Rose was staring at me with barely controlled fury, but she couldn't say a word, not when her husband's job depended on this meeting going well. "Remarkable," Mr. Davidson murmured, scribbling notes. "And you're considering exclusive distribution?" "I am," I replied carefully, "but only with the right partner. Pinnacle would need to guarantee premium placement, coordinated marketing campaigns, and staff training on the brand story. This isn't just clothing. It's helping families feel confident about their choices." "And the financial projections?" I smiled. "Conservative estimates project $120 million in first-year revenue through Pinnacle's 200-plus stores. Within 3 years, we're looking at $350 million annually, making it one of your highest-performing exclusive brands." The numbers hung in the air like thunder. I watched Art's pen freeze mid-word as he processed what I'd just said. His monthly child support payments, money I'd never needed but had accepted anyway, suddenly seemed as insignificant as pocket change. Mr. Davidson was practically glowing. "This is exactly what we've been looking for. The board is going to love these projections." "Actually," I said, checking my phone with practiced timing, "my daughter should be joining us shortly. I hope you don't mind. She's learning the business and often accompanies me to important meetings." "Your daughter works with you?" Mr. Davidson asked with interest. "Heidi is 15, I explained. "She models for both our premium teen line and will be the face of Heidi Everyday's teen collection. She's learning every aspect of the business. She'll inherit the company eventually, but she's insisting on starting from entry-level positions first. She wants to understand every role before taking responsibility for our employees' livelihoods." Rose made a small sound. Part gasp, part strangled laugh. Art had gone completely white. As if summoned by my words, I saw a familiar figure approaching through the restaurant's elegant dining room. Heidi moved with the confident grace of someone comfortable in upscale environments, her long hair catching the light, wearing a simple but perfectly tailored dress from our latest collection. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she said, as she reached our table, her voice carrying the polished warmth of someone raised to handle social situations with ease. "My aunt had an unexpected appointment, and I had to wait for her to drop me off." She was stunning, tall for 15, with Art's dark eyes but my determined jawline. Every inch the poised young woman I'd raised her to be. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my daughter Heidi," I said, standing to embrace her. "Heidi, this is Mr. Davidson from Pinnacle Retail Group." "Such a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Davidson," Heidi said, extending her hand with perfect confidence. "I'm so excited about the potential partnership. The Heidi Everyday line could help so many families access quality clothing." I watched Art's face as he stared at his daughter, the child he'd abandoned 8 years ago. now transformed into this remarkable young woman. His mouth opened slightly as if he wanted to speak, but no words came. "And these are Mr. Davidson's colleagues, Art Larson and Rose Larson," I continued, my voice perfectly neutral. Heidi turned toward them with polite interest, showing no sign of recognition. "Nice to meet you both." Art's voice came out as a croak. "Hello?" Rose managed a stiff nod, her earlier composure completely shattered. "Heidi models for both our lines," Mr. Davidson said, clearly charmed. "Do you enjoy the fashion business?" "I love it," Heidi replied, settling into her chair with easy confidence. "There's something magical about creating clothes that help people feel confident and beautiful. Mom taught me that what we do isn't just about fashion, it's about making people feel special. The Heidi Everyday line is especially meaningful because it brings that feeling to families who couldn't afford it before." I felt a surge of pride so strong it nearly took my breath away. This articulate, confident young woman was the daughter Art had chosen to abandon. The daughter Rose had convinced him he didn't need. "That's a wonderful perspective," Mr. Davidson said. "And you're planning to take over the business someday?" "Eventually, yes," Heidi replied. "But first I want to work every job in the company. I'll start in shipping and receiving, then move through design assistance, customer service, marketing support, everything. I can't lead people effectively if I don't understand what they do." The wisdom in her words, the maturity of her planning, hung in the air like an accusation. This was what Art had thrown away. This was the daughter he'd chosen to forget. Mr. Davidson spent the next hour discussing expansion plans, with Heidi asking insightful questions about market demographics and supply chain logistics that proved she understood the business at a level that would have been impressive for someone twice her age. Art barely spoke, and when he did, his voice was strained and uncertain. Rose sat in rigid silence, her earlier smugness replaced by something that looked like barely controlled panic. Finally, Mr. Davidson checked his watch. "I'm afraid I have another call to take, but this has been incredibly productive. Art, I want you to coordinate with Ms. Cranford's team immediately. Let's get the exclusive partnership contract drafted within the week." He stood, shaking both our hands warmly. "Alyssa, Heidi, this partnership is going to be transformative for both our companies. The board will be thrilled with these projections." As he walked away, already pulling out his phone, we were left in the suddenly quiet corner of the restaurant. Art and Rose sat frozen, clearly wanting to leave but not knowing how to extract themselves gracefully. Art finally found his voice. "Alyssa, I had no idea." "No," I replied calmly, "you didn't." He looked at Heidi, his eyes filling with something that might have been regret. "Heidi, you've grown into such a beautiful young woman." Heidi regarded him with polite interest, as if he were a stranger making small talk. "Thank you." Rose tugged at his sleeve. "We should go." As they stood to leave, Rose finally spoke, her voice tight with barely suppressed emotion. "Congratulations on your success." The word came out like she was choking on broken glass. "Thank you," I replied with genuine warmth. "I hope you both have a wonderful evening." They walked away without another word, Rose practically dragging Art toward the exit. I watched them go, feeling nothing but a profound sense of closure. "Well," Heidi said, her voice bright with amusement, "that was entertaining." I turned to look at my daughter, this remarkable young woman who had just handled meeting her absent father with more grace than most adults could muster. "Heidi, Mom, it's okay," she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "I'm not upset. Actually, I'm kind of glad it happened this way." We walked to the car in comfortable silence, but once we were inside with the doors closed, Heidi started laughing. "Oh my God, Mom, did you see his face when Mr. Davidson mentioned the exclusive partnership and those revenue projections?" "Heidi, no, Mom, it was perfect," she continued, her laughter infectious. "He abandoned us, and look what we built without him. Look who I became without him." Her words hit me with the force of truth. Art hadn't just lost a wife and daughter. He'd lost the chance to watch an extraordinary young woman grow up. He'd missed dance recitals and school plays, soccer games and science fairs. He'd missed watching her develop into someone with wisdom and compassion and strength. "I used to wonder what was wrong with me," Heidi said, her voice growing more serious. "Why he didn't want to see me, why he never called. But now I know. Nothing was wrong with me. Everything was wrong with him. I pulled out of the parking space, my heart full of pride and love for this incredible girl I'd raised. "Mom," she said quietly, "if he ever tries to contact me, and I don't think he will, but if he does, I want you to let him." I glanced at her in surprise. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure, but I want to talk to him myself, not you. I want him to hear what I have to say. I want him to know exactly who I became without him, and I want him to know that I'm okay with that." The maturity in her voice, the strength, made me incredibly proud. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher," she replied with a smile that melted my heart. As we drove home through the city lights, I realized that this confrontation, this reckoning, hadn't been about revenge at all. It had been about truth. The truth of what Art had thrown away, what Rose had helped destroy, and what we had built from the ashes of their betrayal. I had spent 8 years building something extraordinary, not to spite them, but to survive, to provide for my daughter, to prove to myself that I was more than just someone's discarded wife. Tonight, I finally understood that the best revenge wasn't getting even. It was getting ahead. 2 weeks after the restaurant meeting, Art Larson sat in his car outside the gleaming office building that housed Heidi & Co.'s headquarters, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white. The argument with Rose that morning still echoed in his head. "You have to ask her, Art," Rose had said, pacing around their cramped apartment, a far cry from the house they'd lost to foreclosure 6 months ago. "We're 3 months behind on everything. The credit cards are maxed out and my salary barely covers rent. I can't ask my daughter to." "She's not really your daughter anymore, is she?" Rose had snapped, her voice sharp with desperation. "You haven't seen her in 8 years, but she's obviously close to her mother, and her mother just became a multimillionaire. All you have to do is reconnect a little, pull some heartstrings, and convince Heidi to ask Alyssa for help." Art had stared at his wife, this woman he'd destroyed his family for, and felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Rose, I can't. I abandoned her. I don't have the face to." "Then ask about discontinuing the child support," Rose had interrupted. "Tell them you can't afford it anymore. Maybe that'll get them talking about money." The child support. Art had been paying it faithfully for 8 years, even when it meant choosing between groceries and utilities. It was the one thing that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't a complete monster. "The child support is," he'd started, then stopped. The truth was, he'd been thinking of it as leverage. As long as he paid it, he had some connection to Heidi's life, some legal standing, some proof that he was still her father, even if only on paper. But Rose didn't know that. She just saw $800 a month they couldn't afford. Now, sitting outside Alyssa's building, Art felt like he was drowning. The meeting at the restaurant had shown him everything he'd lost, not just a wife and daughter, but the chance to watch an extraordinary young woman grow up. Heidi's poise, her intelligence, her warmth. She was everything he'd hoped she'd become, and he'd had no part in creating that person. The receptionist directed him to the executive floor, and as the elevator climbed, Art tried to rehearse what he'd say. Something casual, something normal, like he was just a businessman stopping by to discuss what? He didn't even know what Pinnacle's ongoing relationship with Heidi & Co. looked like. The elevator doors opened to reveal a sophisticated office space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Through the glass walls of the corner office, he could see Alyssa at her desk, and across from her, Heidi was curled up in a chair, laptop open, looking very much like she belonged there. "Can I help you?" The assistant's voice was polite but curious. "Art Larson from Pinnacle Retail Group," he said, his voice coming out steadier than he felt. "I was hoping to speak with Miss Cranford about the partnership details." The assistant glanced toward the office, then back at him. "I'll let her know you're here." Through the glass, Art watched the assistant speak to Alyssa, saw her look up with surprise, then something that might have been resignation. She nodded, and the assistant returned. "She'll see you now." Art walked into the office on unsteady legs. Alyssa stood to greet him, professional and composed in a way that reminded him she was no longer the devastated woman he'd left in that coffee shop. "Art," she said, her voice neutral, "this is unexpected." Heidi looked up from her laptop, her expression politely curious. She was wearing a simple sundress, probably one of her mother's designs, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked so young, and yet there was something in her eyes that was far older than 15. "Hi," she said simply. "Hello, Heidi." His voice caught slightly on her name. You look wonderful." "Thank you." Her smile was warm but reserved, the kind of politeness she'd show to any of her mother's business associates. "Please sit," Alyssa said, gesturing to the chairs across from her desk. "What can we do for you?" Art settled into a chair, acutely aware that he was in their space now, in the world they'd built without him. "I wanted to discuss some of the logistics for the Heidi Everyday rollout. There are some questions about the marketing timeline." He found himself actually discussing business, falling into the rhythm of meetings and presentations. For a few minutes, it almost felt normal. Alyssa was engaged and professional, asking smart questions about distribution and promotional support. Heidi listened with the focused attention of someone learning the business. But as the conversation wound down, Art felt panic rising in his chest. He couldn't leave. Not yet. Not without at least trying to connect with his daughter. "Heidi," he said, turning toward her. "Your mother tells me you're planning to work your way up through the company." "That's right," she replied, closing her laptop and giving him her full attention. That's very mature of you, very wise." He paused, struggling for words. "I remember when you were little, you used to play dress-up in your mother's sewing room. You'd put on these elaborate fashion shows." Something flickered in Heidi's eyes. Surprise, maybe, that he remembered anything about her childhood. "I still love fashion shows," she said softly. "But now I understand the business behind them." Art felt his chest tighten. This remarkable young woman was his daughter. His daughter, who was confident and articulate and kind, who was learning to run a multi-million-dollar company at 15, and he'd missed all of it. "Heidi, he started, then stopped. What could he possibly say? That he was sorry, that he'd made a mistake, that he wanted to be part of her life now, that he was drowning in debt and desperately needed her help? The words stuck in his throat. Looking at her, really looking at her, he couldn't do it. He couldn't ask this poised, gracious young woman to convince her mother to bail out the man who'd abandoned them both. "I should let you both get back to work," he said abruptly, standing up. Alyssa checked her watch with practiced efficiency. "Actually, we have lunch plans. If there's nothing else business-related to discuss." Her tone was polite but firm. The meeting was over. "Of course," Art said, moving toward the door. "Thank you for your time." "Mr. Larson?" Heidi's voice stopped him at the threshold. He turned back, hope flaring irrationally in his chest. "I hope things work out well for you," she said, and her voice was genuinely kind, "with whatever you're going through." Art stared at her, this daughter who somehow knew he was struggling, who was offering him grace he didn't deserve. His eyes filled with tears he couldn't let fall. "Thank you," he managed. You're an amazing young woman, Heidi." "I know," she replied with a small smile that was pure confidence, not arrogance. "Mom raised me well." As Art walked back to the elevator, he heard Heidi's voice through the office door. "Mom, that was hard to watch. He looked so lost." And Alyssa's response, "That's not our responsibility anymore, sweetheart. Are you ready for lunch?" The elevator doors closed, and Art leaned against the wall, finally allowing himself to break down. He'd come here to use his daughter, to manipulate her into helping him, and instead he'd been reminded of everything he'd thrown away. Rose was waiting for him at home, eager to hear how it had gone. But Art couldn't tell her the truth, that facing Heidi had shown him exactly what kind of man he'd become, and he couldn't live with himself if he sank any lower. The child support payments would continue. It was the only thing left that made him feel human. "You what?" Rose's voice was a dangerous whisper when Art walked through the door of their cramped apartment. "I couldn't do it, Rose. She's my daughter. I couldn't ask her to—" "She's not your daughter!" Rose exploded, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "You walked away from her 8 years ago. You chose me. And now when we need help, when we're about to lose everything, you suddenly grow a conscience?" Art sank onto their second-hand couch, still seeing Heidi's kind eyes in his mind. "You didn't see her, Rose. She's incredible, mature and smart and rich," Rose finished bitterly. "Don't forget rich. While we're eating ramen noodles and dodging calls from creditors, your precious daughter is learning to run a multi-million-dollar empire. Rose, please. No, she was pacing now, her designer dress, bought back when they could afford such things, wrinkled from stress. Do you know what Mrs. Henderson from downstairs said to me yesterday? She asked if I was the Rose from the society pages, the one who stole Art Larson from his family. Do you know how humiliating that was? Art watched his wife, this woman he'd destroyed his marriage for, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. When had she become so bitter? When had her love turned into this desperate, grasping thing? We still have my job, he said quietly. The Pinnacle partnership will go through. My position will be secure. Rose laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. Your position? Art, you're going to have to present your ex-wife's business plan to the board. You're going to have to stand up there and tell them why they should give millions of dollars to the woman you threw away. How secure do you think your position really is? The board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. Art had 5 days to prepare a presentation about Heidi Everyday that would convince Pinnacle's executives to approve the terms needed to secure Alyssa's partnership. 5 days to figure out how to convince his own company to give his ex-wife everything she was asking for. The irony wasn't lost on him. Pinnacle wasn't doing Alyssa a favor. They were desperately trying to win her business. She had offers from Target, Walmart, and 3 other major retailers. If Pinnacle wanted exclusive rights to Heidi Everyday, they'd have to meet her terms. And Art was the one who had to sell his bosses on why Alyssa Cranford held all the cards. He spent those days researching everything he could about Heidi & Co., about children's fashion markets, about why other retailers were courting her so aggressively. He studied Alyssa's negotiation position with the kind of intense focus he hadn't applied to anything in years. And the more he learned, the more he realized just how much power she actually held. Thursday morning arrived, gray and drizzling, matching Art's mood perfectly. He'd barely slept, and Rose had given him the silent treatment for 3 days straight. She was coming to the meeting. As executive assistant to the regional director, she was required to take notes, but she'd made it clear she blamed him for their desperate situation. The Pinnacle boardroom was all glass and steel, designed to intimidate. 12 executives sat around a polished conference table with Mr. Davidson at the head. Rose sat in a corner with her laptop, her face a mask of professional composure that Art knew hid seething resentment. Art, Mr. Davidson said, you've had a chance to review Ms. Cranford's terms. Walk us through why we should meet her demands for the Heidi Everyday partnership. Art stood, his hands slightly shaky as he clicked to his first slide. Ladies and gentlemen, Alyssa Cranford is in the driver's seat here. We're competing against Target, Walmart, and Costco for exclusive rights to what could be the biggest children's retail opportunity of the decade. He launched into his presentation, and despite everything, his research paid off. He talked about how other retailers were bidding for her business, about the premium placement and marketing support she was demanding. He showed comparative analyses that made it clear why meeting her terms was essential. The founder, Alyssa Cranford, has built something unprecedented, Art continued, clicking to a slide showing competing offers. She doesn't need us, we need her. Target has offered her better shelf placement. Walmart is promising a larger marketing budget. We have to exceed their offers or lose this opportunity entirely. Impressive numbers, said Margaret Chen, the VP of Merchandising. But what makes you confident she can replicate this success at our price points? Art felt sweat beading on his forehead. Miss Cranford has proven she understands both luxury and accessibility. Her premium line maintains 87% customer retention while commanding prices 300% above market average. She knows how to deliver quality at every level. And you've worked with her directly? Asked another executive. Art's mouth went dry. In the corner, he could see Rose's fingers frozen over her laptop keys, her knuckles white with tension. Yes. I've had extensive interactions with both Miss Cranford and her daughter, who serves as the teen face of both brands. Their understanding of the market is exceptional. It wasn't entirely a lie. He had just had an extensive interaction with them. Just not the kind that qualified him to speak as an expert on their business practices. What about her production capacity? Margaret asked. Can she handle the volume we're talking about? Art clicked to another slide, grateful for his research. She's already contracted with 3 manufacturing facilities and has agreements in place for rapid scaling. Conservative estimates show she can meet demand for our initial 50-store rollout within 6 months, with full chain deployment possible within 18 months. The questions kept coming, and Art found himself defending Alyssa's business acumen with genuine enthusiasm. Because the truth was, what she'd built was remarkable. The woman he'd dismissed as having a little sewing business had created something that made Pinnacle's executives salivate with anticipation. Revenue projections? Mr. Davidson asked. Year 1, $120 million through Pinnacle stores. Year 3, $350 million, making it one of our highest-performing exclusive partnerships. Art paused, then added, These are conservative estimates. Given the pent-up demand in this market segment, we could exceed these numbers significantly. He could see the dollar signs in their eyes. Around the table, executives were nodding, making notes, already calculating how this partnership would look in their quarterly reports. Outstanding presentation, Art, Mr. Davidson said when Art finally sat down. I think we're all impressed with the opportunity. Margaret, can you work with Art to get the contract terms finalized? Absolutely, Margaret replied. Art, this could be career-defining work. Well done. As the meeting broke up, executives clustered around Art, asking follow-up questions, praising his analysis. For a moment, he felt like the professional he used to be, competent, respected, valuable. Then he caught sight of Rose's face. She was still sitting in the corner, laptop closed, staring at him with naked fury. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the red flush of anger and humiliation creeping up her neck because she'd just watched her husband deliver a masterful presentation about the success of the woman he'd thrown away for her. She'd listened to him praise Alyssa's business genius with genuine admiration. She'd seen him command the room while discussing the empire his ex-wife had built. And she knew, they both knew, that Art was only in this room, only had this job, only had any professional standing at all because Alyssa had chosen to work with Pinnacle. His career now depended entirely on his ex-wife's success. As the executives filed out, still buzzing with excitement about the Heidi Everyday partnership, Rose finally approached him. Congratulations, she said, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. I'm sure Alyssa would be so proud of how well you presented her business. Art looked at his wife, really looked at her, and saw something he'd been avoiding for months. The woman he'd destroyed his family for was small and bitter and desperately unhappy, and she was never going to forgive him for the choices that had led them here. Rose, don't, she said, gathering her things with sharp, angry movements. Just don't. I'll see you at home. She walked out without another word, leaving Art alone in the empty boardroom, finally understanding the full cost of his betrayal. He hadn't just lost a wife and daughter 8 years ago. He'd lost himself. 3 months after the Pinnacle partnership was finalized, Alyssa stood in the gleaming showroom of their flagship store, watching families browse the Heidi Everyday collection. Children ran their hands over soft fabrics while parents checked price tags with pleasant surprise. It was everything she'd envisioned, quality clothing that didn't break the bank. Miss Cranford? Her assistant's voice came through her earpiece. There's someone here to see you. Says his name is Art Larson. Alyssa's hand stilled on the display she was adjusting. Send him up to the office. The elevator ride to the corporate floor felt endless. When the doors opened, Art stepped out looking older than his 43 years. His expensive suit couldn't hide the weight he'd lost or the lines of stress etched around his eyes. Thank you for seeing me, he said, his voice uncertain. 5 minutes, Alyssa replied, leading him into a conference room. I have a board call. Art sat across from her, fidgeting with papers he'd brought. The Heidi Everyday launch exceeded all projections. Congratulations. Thank you. Was there something specific you needed? He took a shaky breath. I wanted to apologize, properly, not just for leaving, but for everything I said about your business, about who you were. Alyssa studied him carefully. And I wanted you to know that Rose and I... He struggled with the words. We're getting divorced. Despite everything, Alyssa felt a flicker of sympathy. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Art looked up, genuine curiosity in his eyes. Because I'm not. She's been having an affair with Davidson for 6 months. Turns out she's very good at identifying men with power and money. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Art, why are you telling me this? Because I wanted you to know that you were right. About everything. About what kind of man I was. About what I was throwing away. His voice cracked slightly. I lost the best thing that ever happened to me, and I've spent 8 years watching my daughter become extraordinary without me. Heidi is extraordinary, Alyssa agreed, but not because of what you did or didn't do. She's extraordinary because of who she chose to become. Art nodded, tears finally spilling over. I know I have no right to ask this, but would you tell her something for me? Tell her yourself. She's downstairs in the showroom. The color drained from Art's face. I couldn't. She doesn't want to see me. Have you asked her? Before Art could answer, Heidi's voice came from the doorway. Actually, I've been waiting for you to ask. Both adults turned to see her standing there in one of her own designs, a sophisticated dress that somehow still looked age-appropriate. At 15, she carried herself with a confidence that took Art's breath away. Heidi, he whispered. Hello, Dad. The word carried no warmth, but no anger either, just acknowledgement. I should go, Alyssa said, starting to stand. No, Heidi said firmly. Stay. This concerns you too. She walked into the room and took a seat, her posture perfect, her expression calm. I know about the divorce. I know about Rose's affair. I know you're struggling financially. Art's mouth opened in shock. I also know you've been paying child support faithfully for 8 years, even when you couldn't afford it. Heidi's voice was steady, measured. Mom told me last month that you never missed a payment, even when your own rent was late. Alyssa looked surprised. How did you? I asked our accountant to track it. I wanted to understand what kind of man my father really was. Heidi turned back to Art. And what I learned is that you're not evil. You're just weak. The words hit Art like a physical blow, but he didn't flinch. You chose immediate gratification over long-term happiness. You chose what felt good over what was right, and when the consequences caught up with you, you were too proud to admit your mistake. Heidi paused. But you kept paying that child support, even when Rose probably told you to stop, even when it meant you couldn't afford groceries some weeks. Art's tears were flowing freely now. How did you know? Because I know what $800 a month means to someone drowning in debt. Because I understand sacrifice, even when it comes from someone who's already lost everything. She stood up, smoothing her dress with hands that didn't shake. I forgive you, Dad. Not because you deserve it, but because I choose to. But forgiveness doesn't mean relationship. It doesn't mean trust. It means I'm not going to carry your mistakes with me anymore. Heidi, I'm not done. Her voice cut through his plea with quiet authority. You want to know what you can do for me? What you can do for Mom? Stop trying to fix what you broke. Stop trying to earn something you can't earn back. Just be a better man going forward, for your own sake, not ours. The room fell silent except for the distant sounds of the city below. The child support stops now, Heidi continued. Not because we don't need it, we don't, but because you do. Use that money to rebuild your life. Get counseling. Figure out who you want to be when you're not trying to undo the past. Art looked between his daughter and his ex-wife, seeing the family he'd destroyed and the strength they'd built without him. I don't deserve either of you, he said finally. No. Alyssa said quietly, you don't. But that's not the point anymore. Heidi walked to the door, then turned back one final time. I hope you find peace, Dad. Real peace. But you're not going to find it with us. After she left, Art and Alyssa sat in silence for several minutes. She's remarkable, Art said finally. Yes, she is. Thank you, he said, standing to leave, for raising her to be better than both of us. I didn't raise her to be better than me, Art. I raised her to be better than the person I was when I was with you. The words hung in the air as Art walked to the elevator, understanding finally that some betrayals can't be undone. They can only be learned from. 6 months later, Alyssa received a card in the mail. Inside was a photo of Art at what looked like a graduation ceremony, holding a certificate in addiction counseling. The note was simple, starting over at 44. Thank you for showing me it's possible. A. Heidi found her mother reading it in her office that evening. "He looks good," Heidi said, glancing at the photo. "He does." "Are you happy for him?" Alyssa considered the question seriously. "I'm glad he's trying to be better, but his journey isn't about us anymore, sweetheart. It's about him." Heidi nodded, then smiled, that brilliant smile that lit up every room she entered. "Speaking of journeys, did you see the numbers from today? Heidi Everyday is officially the fastest-growing children's line in Pinnacle's history." "I saw," Alyssa grinned back. "Ready to change the world, one dress at a time?" "Always," Heidi replied. "But first, want to grab dinner? I'm starving, and I know this great little place that serves the best pasta in town." As they left the office together, mother and daughter, business partners, best friends, Alyssa realized that the betrayal that had once destroyed her world had ultimately led her exactly where she was meant to be. Sometimes the ending of one story is just the beginning of a much better one. 15 years later, the corner office that had once been Alyssa's now belonged to Heidi. At 30, she commanded the same respect her mother had, but with an ease that came from growing up in the business world. The nameplate on her desk read, "Heidi Cranford, CEO." She'd chosen to keep her mother's maiden name when she officially took over the company. "Mom, you sure you're ready for this?" Heidi asked, reviewing the transition documents spread across the conference table. 3 months on a cruise ship with Aunt Helene and Uncle Mark? You might go stir-crazy. Alyssa laughed, looking remarkably youthful at 47. Success had been kind to her. She was confident, content, and ready for the next chapter of her life. "I'm ready to let someone else make the big decisions for a while. Besides, you've been essentially running things for 2 years now." "There is something I need to tell you before you go," Alyssa said, her tone shifting to something more serious. "About your father." Heidi looked up from the documents, surprised. "What about him?" Alyssa took a deep breath. "He never stopped sending the child support." "What do you mean? I thought we agreed he should stop when I turned 18. "We did. But he kept sending it anyway. Every month, $800. When you turned 18, he increased it. When you graduated college, he kept sending it. Even now, at 30, he's still sending money." Heidi stared at her mother in shock. "How long have you known?" "The whole time. He made me promise not to tell you." Alyssa opened her desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "Sweetheart, remember when I helped you with the down payment for your house in Bellevue? The money I said came from my savings?" "Yes." "That was your father's money. All of it. 23 years of child support he'd accumulated, plus extra he started sending when he got promoted. $527,000. Alyssa's voice softened. "When I told him you were buying a house, he sent even more to cover the property taxes for the first 5 years. Heidi sat back in her chair, overwhelmed. "You mean, when you gave me that money for my house?" "It was your father's love, expressed the only way he knew how. He said he knew he couldn't be there to help you buy your first home, but he could at least make sure you had the means to do it." The room fell silent. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Heidi could see the Pinnacle building in the distance, where the man who'd once thrown away everything was quietly, steadily trying to make amends. "There's more," Alyssa said gently. "He never remarried. He's lived alone for 23 years. And according to industry contacts, he has a photo of you on his desk from your college graduation. He tells people you're his daughter and that you're the reason he gets up every morning." Tears began to fall down Heidi's cheeks. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because he asked me not to. And because I wanted to see if he would keep doing it, if this was genuine or just guilt." Alyssa reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. 23 years, sweetheart. Through his divorce, through his financial struggles, through rebuilding his entire life. He never missed a payment. The next day, Heidi found herself standing in the lobby of the Pinnacle building, her heart racing. She'd spent the night thinking about her father's quiet dedication, his 23 years of faithful payments, his solitary life dedicated to a family he'd lost the right to claim. "I'm here to see Art Larson," she told the receptionist. Tell him Heidi Cranford is here." The wait felt endless. When the elevator doors opened, Art stepped out looking distinguished in his well-tailored suit, his hair silver now, but his posture straight and confident. He was a man who'd found his footing again, but his eyes held shock and concern. "Heidi," he breathed, "is everything okay? Is your mother—" "She's fine," Heidi said quickly. "She told me about the money, Dad. All of it." Art's face went pale. "She wasn't supposed to tell you." "Why?" Heidi asked. "Why did you keep sending it? Why didn't you remarry? Why have you spent 23 years living like a monk when you could have moved on?" Art was quiet for a long moment, then gestured toward the small cafe in the building's atrium. They sat across from each other at a tiny table, and for the first time in 23 years, father and daughter were in the same space. "Do you want the truth?" he asked finally. "Please." "Because I wake up every morning knowing I had everything and threw it away, and the only thing that makes that bearable is knowing that somewhere you and your mother are living good lives, that my choices didn't destroy you." His voice was quiet, steady. "The money, it's not about guilt, it's about love. It's the only way I know how to still be a father, even from a distance." Heidi felt tears welling in her eyes. "Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I can't undo what I did. But loving you both from afar, making sure you never want for anything, it's what keeps me going. It's what makes me remember who I want to be." They sat in silence, 23 years of unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Heidi spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you want to have dinner with me, Dad?" Art's eyes filled with tears, tears of joy, of disbelief, of 23 years of hope he'd barely dared to acknowledge. "Yes," he said, his voice breaking. "I would love that more than anything." Later that evening, as they sat in a quiet restaurant talking carefully about safe topics, her work, the business, his career, Heidi found herself studying this man who was her father. He was different now, steadier. The restless dissatisfaction that had driven him away was gone, replaced by a quiet contentment that came from accepting his choices and their consequences. "Can I ask you something?" she said as they shared dessert. "Anything. Do you ever regret it? The way it happened, I mean. Not leaving. I understand you and Mom weren't right for each other, but the way you did it, the lying, the abandonment." Art set down his fork and looked directly at her. "Every single day. Not because I think your mother and I would have worked out. We probably wouldn't have. But because I could have been honest. I could have been kind. I could have made sure you knew you were loved through the whole thing." "I know now," Heidi said softly, "because of your mother, because she was strong enough to be both parents when I was too weak to be one." As they walked to their cars, Art stopped suddenly. "Heidi, thank you for tonight, for becoming the extraordinary woman you are despite me, not because of me, for letting me still be your father, even if it's just in the footnotes." Heidi smiled, the first truly warm smile she'd given him since she was 7 years old. "Maybe we can do this again sometime, as father and daughter." "I'd like that," Art said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'd like that more than anything in the world." As she drove home, Heidi realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or excusing. It was about releasing the power the past held over the future. And tonight, for the first time in years, she felt like she had a father again. The best revenge her mother had taught her was getting ahead. But the best healing she was learning now was letting love find its way back home.
If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Don't forget to follow for more content just like this. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.